A post-apocalyptic world ravaged by zombies, hybrid children live like rats in laboratories and can only come out of their cells to learn. Melanie and the other youngsters with disabilities and wheelchairs are getting ready for chemistry class with Miss Helen. But Melanie interrupts her teacher and asks her to read a story. Although they are all children, all of the soldiers on this military base have been trained to treat all children as guinea pigs, and Helen is the only one who shows them some affection. Consequently, they all have a strong affection for their teacher. The young people are brought back to their cells after class, and the guards have their guns on them throughout the time until the door is shut. 3 times a day, the children are fed maggots and insects, and, at least once a day, Melanie is visited by Dr. Caldwell. That day, the doctor gives the girl a riddle to try and solve and tells her that there is a cat trapped inside a closed box, which could be eliminated or alive. But how would Melanie know if the cat is alive or dead if she doesn't open the box? Feeling challenged by the riddle, the girl says she'll think about it and soon give her answer. Caldwell then asks Melanie to say a number from 1 to 20, and she chooses 13. On the following day, when Melanie comes to school, she sees that Kenny, the boy in cell 13, has not attended school and starts to think that something has happened to him, and that it is her fault. Seeing that the students are worried about their missing classmate, Helen asks them to create a story and frees them from their chains so that they can write it. Once everyone has completed their tasks, Melanie volunteers to read her story aloud, and recounts a story about a beautiful woman who was walking in the woods when she was attacked by a giant. The creature wanted to devour her, and, despite the woman's efforts to escape, the monster was stronger and managed to capture after. However, when the giant was about to feed on her, a girl appeared and freed the woman from the monster's clutches. Then they were mother and daughter and lived happily ever after. When the teacher hears this story, she gets emotional and begins to cry. Concerned for the woman, Melanie apologizes for having upset her, but Helen walks over to her and rubs her head affectionately. Just then, Sergeant Eddie bursts into the room and fights with the teacher for having touched one of those monsters. To remind her that those kids are just freaks, he rubs his arm to spread his body odor and approaches one of the boys. The boy and his classmates smell human flesh and lose their control and attempt to eat Eddie. Helen sends the man out of her class and goes about her business as usual, as in the case of Furious. She is returned to her cell and meets up with the sergeant once more and says that if she had a box to hold all the evils in the world, she would put him in it. As punishment for what she has just said, Melanie is stuck in her chair, unable to move. Helen visits the girl that evening and finds she has been handcuffed all day. Immediately, the woman starts shouting for the guards' help, but no one answers. So, she decides to open the cell herself and free her student. When she smells the woman, Melanie starts to lose control, but tries to hold it together and asks her to move away. Then the girl gets out of control and attempts to bite her teacher, but Helen escapes in time and begs her to forgive her for provoking the whole incident. The next morning, Melanie receives another visit from Dr. Caldwell, and the woman asks her to give her a new number. This time, the girl selects her own door number, although she knows that something bad might happen to her. Minutes later, when the guards show up to take the children to class, Melanie takes her seat as usual, but receives the news that this time she won't be joining her other classmates. For the first time, the young woman is taken outside the military base and sees hundreds of zombies trying to break down the metal fences protecting the installation. Eddie then takes her to Dr. Caldwell's laboratory, and girl is given a sedative. The doctor and her assistant lift Melanie out of the wheelchair and lay the girl's body on a stretcher for the experiments to begin when Melanie blacks out. Suddenly, Helen comes out of nowhere and tells him that she will no longer go along with this. Then Caldwell speaks to the teacher in a calm manner and convinces her to drop the extinguisher. The doctor immediately sprays her with pepper spray and tells her assistant to call security. The doctor apologizes for having to do this and says that he respects the teacher's feelings, but Melanie is the key ingredient for the vaccine he is creating and must be sacrificed to save thousands of lives. Suddenly, the security alarm goes off, meaning that the zombies have infiltrated the base. Then, as the assistant is locking the windows, she is attacked and the doctor rushes to help her get rid of the monsters. As she fights those creatures, Caldwell ends up cutting her hand and must run for her life as her assistant is also morphing. Melanie is half zombie, so the creatures don't attack her, and, with the aid of a scalpel, she frees herself from the stretcher. Then she leaves the tent and discovers the soldiers are engaged in a bloody war. The girl is angry when she sees 2 guards attacking Helen, and bites them on the neck. Afterwards, Melanie collapses and her teacher carries her out of the war zone. As the woman is about to be eaten by a bunch of zombies, an army tank comes along and they both somehow get a ride on it, far away from the military base. When they arrive at a safe location, the sergeant discovers Melanie is in the car as well and is about to shoot her. But Helen creates a shield with her body and saves the girl. She then lets the door open for Melanie to get out. The young woman is free for the first time in her life and she doesn't know what to do with her freedom. So Melanie sits down on the lawn, and Dr. Caldwell says she must have the guinea pig alive to do her experiments. When her teacher approaches, Melanie says that she has done something very bad and feels bad for having bitten the soldiers. Faced with this new crisis, Eddie draws up a new plan of action and says that the group will pay a visit to the nearest military barracks for supplies. Upon hearing this, Helen asks about the base's employees and the sergeant says that they are already presumed eliminated. As for the children, they'll be fine because those creatures they call the Hungry Ones don't attack their fellow human beings. Melanie is stuck in the outside seat of the car for fear of attacking someone on the team. The group stops along the way to drink water at a riverbank, but is surprised by the presence of some zombies. The soldiers attempt to quell the attack, but Helen rushes to free Melanie and gets her into the vehicle to hide. One soldier is bitten on the arm during the battle and just before entering the car, starts to change. Sergeant Eddie pulls out his gun and shoots his comrade in the head. The survivors are safe, and Helen tells Melanie what has happened, and that the hungry are infected with a parasitic fungus that can be passed on through bodily fluids. So, if those zombies bite someone, then that person becomes a zombie. Minutes later, they come out of hiding to continue their journey and Eddie realizes that, during the firefight, one of the bullets pierced the fuel tank. Therefore, the team will have to continue walking to London and, after a short break, they decide to enter the houses in search of food. But all around the perimeter are hungry ones, so they have to use a scent-blocking gel to prevent them from drawing their attention. What's more, they mustn't make any noise as any kind of sudden movement could wake them up. Slowly, the small team manages to advance and suddenly they come across an infected woman pushing a baby carriage. At this point, they stop walking and stand still so as not to attract the creature's attention. However, Caldwell decides to walk over to the zombie to check what's inside that baby carriage, and when she removes the baby's blanket, she realizes that it has been devoured by a sinister rat. Frightened, the woman emits a sound capable of waking up some zombies. As they wake up, Eddie and Kieran shoot them in the head and the small group must hurry before all the monsters wake up at once and join forces to attack them. They walk for a few minutes and discover an abandoned warehouse, where they hide. They will use the place as a shelter to rest, but first they will check if there are aberrations inside. So, as Helen and the soldiers are scouting the perimeter, Dr. Caldwell watches Melanie. Since she can't leave, the girl takes the opportunity to investigate her past and asks the doctor to tell her where she came from. The woman then states that during the rescue missions, Sergeant Eddie and other soldiers used to go to certain town. One of these journeys, they stumbled upon something odd. There were infected newborn babies in a hospital, but they were different from all the other hungry babies in that they could think and interact with their surroundings as normal people. The newborns were found in a maternity hospital next to their mothers, but their bellies were torn open and their organs had been devoured from the inside. Dr. Caldwell's theory is that those mothers were infected in one event and the embryos they carried contracted the infection via the placenta. Then, when their bodies were well developed, they devoured their mothers' abdomens to get out. Hearing this story, Melanie understands why Caldwell wants to use her as a guinea pig to create a vaccine. In the meantime, Helen walks through the facility and encounters a zombie in chains and instantly kills it. After the sweep, the group comes to the conclusion that the shelter is safe and decides to take a break to rest. At night, when everyone is sleeping, the teacher gives Melanie clean clothes and promises that she will see if she can get food for Melanie in the morning. However, at dawn, Eddie realizes that the outskirts of the building are crawling with zombies, so they won't be able to leave. So Melanie says she'll go outside and set up a distraction to divert the hungry. Eddie, with no other choice, lets her go and after eating a cat she found nearby, she enters a house where she meets a dog. She then takes the dog on her lap and uses it to distract the zombies. The group manages to get away alive and walks a few more kilometers until they find another horde of hungry ones. They immediately go to the terrace of a building to make it easier to see and plan their escape. Again, Melanie volunteers to find a safe way. This time she uses a radio to communicate with the rest of the team. Eddie and the others manage to cross safely and at some point on the way, Caldwell discovers spores of the fungus ready to release new particles and infect people through the air. They know that they are in a serious danger, so they speed up and keep on walking until they find a whole tower of sporangia, which looks like a giant tree. The doctor then states that the reason that there are no zombies there is because the fungus has eaten all their brains and is now in the reproductive stage. When she analyzes the structure, Caldwell finds hundreds of sporangia and says that if they open up, it will be the end of the world. Eddie discovers a mobile lab and the doctor explains to him how to open the doors. The installation is shielded and 100% protected. What's more, it runs on sunlight so that it is always active. When they get to the lab, Helen begins searching for food, and Eddie attempts to contact the military barracks. But no one responds to the man, and he has to repair the motors so that the installation can proceed. Meanwhile, Kieran offers to go out in search of supplies, and Melanie reveals that she also needs to go out hunting as she is getting hungry. After eating a pigeon, she falls asleep again, and when she wakes up, she goes to investigate what's inside that building. The girl is surprised to discover a band of wild children there. Those youngsters are also hybrids, but they have survived on their own since birth and they don't know how to communicate with other humans. Suddenly, the whole group comes out of hiding and Melanie soon begins to suspect that they are going after Kieran. She immediately goes back to the base and requests assistance and tells them that the soldier is in danger. At this point, Eddie tries to contact his partner, but he doesn't answer as he has just removed his equipment to get under the gates of a store in search of food. As the sergeant is leaving to find Kieran, they are able to reach the barracks and Eddie confirms his location, but learns that all of the bases are under attack. With no hope of being rescued, the group goes after the soldier and Melanie uses her keen sense of smell to track him down. As he is eating, Kieran is surprised to see a child arrive, who uses a rat to attract him because she thinks that all humans eat living things. He tries to assist the girl, but falls into the trap. The man is soon attacked by another child from the group and soon devoured by the hungry youngsters. When they finally locate him, all that remains are the remains of the soldier, and Melanie soon discovers that, like Kieran, they have been set up too. Determined to protect Helen and Eddie, the girl tries to communicate with the children and asks the sergeant not to shoot any of them because, just like them, these youngsters are also just trying to survive. The girl is left alone to deal with the savages and the leader of the gang. They begin a duel at that moment and Melanie ties the boy's wrists with her handcuffs. She then hits him a few times with a baseball bat until he is out. After this show of strength, Melanie asks her friends not to look at the other children and pretend to be afraid of her. The girl's plan is to make the others think that those humans are her prey, and the children try to steal her food. Melanie will attack them. The three soon get back to the mobile lab where Dr. Caldwell is wearing an oxygen mask. Not understanding what is going on, Helen tries to argue, but Melanie soon realizes that the doctor has used sleeping gas to put them out. The wound she got at the military base has only worsened since then, and she found out that she was infected with it. As she nears death, Caldwell decides to complete her research, but she must have Melanie as her guinea pig, and Helen will not agree to this. As she turns around again, she sees Melanie standing right in front of her and finds that Melanie is not affected by the gas, but the fungus in her body is metabolizing the oxygen for her. As a last resort, Caldwell uses emotional blackmail to try to convince the girl to be her guinea pig and says that if Melanie doesn't help her find a cure, Helen and all the other humans who don't belong to the second generation of infected will turn into zombies. However, Melanie doesn't think it's right that she and the other children need to perish so that adults can live, so she refuses to donate her brain to the research. The young woman then makes a drastic decision and, after picking up a box of matches, asks the doctor not to leave the laboratory as she will be safe there. But Caldwell doesn't pay her any attention and instead pursues the girl. Melanie quickly makes her way to the towers surrounded by the fungal spores. The doctor is surrounded by hungry children and eaten alive as she is trying to reach it. Upon arriving at the tower, the girl lights a match and sets fire to the parched bodies of the deceased hosts of the parasite that has turned all of humanity into zombies. Caldwell said these sporangia don't open up by hand, but are triggered by humidity and heat. This can lead to their bursting open when the fire burns, and release of small spores of the fungus into the air. Now, it's not just zombies that are the threat anymore. Anyone who inhales those particles will be infected. Melanie meets the sergeant on the way back to the lab, and regrets that Eddie left the chamber as she didn't want him to get hurt. When he realizes what has happened, the man despairs and says he doesn't want to become a hungry man, so he begs Melanie to shoot him in the head. The girl waits patiently, out of compassion, until Eddie is completely changed and has destroyed him as he has asked. Minutes later, Helen wakes up and gets up to look for Melanie, but before the woman can leave the lab, she sees the spores in the air and the young woman is at the door to keep her teacher from leaving and getting infected, and they know know that they have only each other. After a couple of days, Melanie meets the other young people who lived with her on the military base, and the classmates go together to Helen's classes. In addition to them, feral children are also invited to join the class, and Melanie hopes that they will soon learn to live in society. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, leave a comment about your favorite movie, and we will make it next. Thanks for watching.